What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with the second tie-in for the Marvel DC crossover. The first one was Deadpool Batman. This one is Batman and Deadpool. Totally different plot, and there's going to be a cool caveat here. But those of you guys who are old school Marvel DC crossover fans are actually going to recognize something in this. I think newer fans aren't going to know, right? So of course we're going to have to explain it. But OG fans, you guys know what's going on. So what this does is this opens up with Eternity and another cosmic entity, whose name I don't think is revealed. But right off the bat, it says, once upon a would you just imagine? And this is taking place in Anthropomorpho's Big Bang Singularities bar. Two lonely universes bopping solo in the void until a glance askance in the cosmic dance became a chance for romance, and one thing led to another, right? So the classic example, right? Two folks meeting at a bar, they start dancing with each other, they end up going home and knocking boots. It's romantic connection, right? You could set your watch to this. But here's the cool thing about it, right? Anthropomorpho. For those of you guys who are not familiar with Marvel Comics, Anthropomorpho is the head of what's called the Dimension of Manifestations. What does that mean? So in Marvel Comics, while cosmic entities do technically have the ability to manifest on their own, which is to say Eternity just creating a form for himself and appearing, it almost never works that way. Instead, what happens is that as cosmic abstracts, they usually travel to the Dimension of Manifestations. They meet with Anthropomorpho, and the manifestations provide them an M-body, or a manifestation body, which they in turn occupy and then appear in the main Marvel Universe to whoever they need to show up to. Now, there have also been multiple instances over the course of Marvel Comics where the Dimension of Manifestations has served as a kind of like trial ground, right? For example, that took place during the aftermath to Infinity Gauntlet, going into Warlock and the Infinity Watch, and then eventually Infinity War. But it is cool to see this whole thing being referenced. Honestly, outside of the most recent Storm comic, I thought we would never see it again. But at that point, you basically switch over to Batman, because what that whole scene with the cosmic entities is designed to do is to basically illustrate the idea that two separate realities are merging with one another. It's Grant Morrison, right? He just loves meta commentary and the abstract stuff. But at that point, Batman ends up conversing with a guy by the name of Victor. And while we don't necessarily know the story of Victor, all he really does is talk about how this whole thing is his fault, right? That he's listening to music and he says, this is our song, and oh God, we were getting married. Everything's gone wrong. She's gone and nothing can bring her back, not even you. And so Batman, seeming to at least on some level be aware of what's going on here, just simply says, like, maybe we can put that eidetic memory of yours to work, Victor. Tell me exactly what you saw that day and where, and we will make sure that Amanda Waller's people do not get away with it. And so following that, Batman switches over to Greece, where he's kind of investigating everything. And he says, whatever happens, do not engage until we know what we're dealing with. Victor Gover said this was the last known location of the target, but somebody got here ahead of us. Wait for my signal. Now, there is another person here, and it's not Deadpool, but it is going to be kind of cool here in a second, because Batman just says, I mean that. The target artifact has potentially reality-twisting capabilities. Checkmate soldiers running errands for Amanda Waller, like Gover said. They already paid the price, and something killed these were-creatures. Because when he gets into this clearing, there's just corpses everywhere, right? And then he notices something in the wall. He's like a batarang, right? But it's not one of mine. And then a hand just kind of reaches out behind him, and suddenly he's gone. And he just reappears in the hands of Deadpool, which is kind of wonky, because the funny thing about this is that the way Grant Morrison writes Deadpool here is classic Christopher Priest Deadpool, right? Way back in the day when basically Wade started breaking the fourth wall all the time, when it wasn't really like a rare occurrence the way it was in the Joe Kelly, Ed McGuinness run, right? For like maybe 2 or 3 times the entire time that Kelly was writing him, Deadpool might break the fourth wall. No. Christopher Priest is the one that made that a regular thing. And so this feels very similar to that if you're a fan of Deadpool from like the early 2000s. And so at that point, he's like, okay, let's get to the here and now, right? Let's focus on like what's actually happening. And so what's kind of funny here is that Deadpool, in explaining all of this, right? He's like, dear Lord, right? Like I tried to warn him something like this would happen, that it's all just kind of a monologue, right? It's basically an opening salvo, right? He was like, before you get all judgy, that attention grabbing opener comes with full context. We're not there yet is all. This is flashback, slow-mo. Learn, trust, Effendi. Put your hand in the hand of the man who calmed the waters. I'll show you how it all went down. And so at that point, you switch over to the aftermath of this great big huge fight. And Deadpool is just kind of being absolutely insane and chaotic here. It's why I say classic Christopher Priest Deadpool, right? It's like heavy breathing, labored, choppy, lustful. Okay, that's one wall. Then there's two walls. And he's like, there's three walls. And he's like, oh my God, I can see you. Seemingly he breaks the fourth wall. And he's like, maybe I should come back later. Or maybe you'd prefer me to pose. Talk about mixed signals. And he says, hey, spawn of Satan, what's with all the ticking? And it's just like these little ducks that are like quacking. It's pure insanity here. He gets blown through one of the walls when they explode. And then he just kind of looks up and he was like, I'm the kind of guy you expect to find in a budget hell like this. What sickening crime brought you here, sis? And it's just like Batman standing there, right in front of him, holding Deadpool's legs. And he was like, I hoped that you might have some answers. And he's like, I think these are yours, right? Because Batman's been trapped here just like Deadpool has. And up until this moment, it was just Deadpool sitting in a cell being insane. Now, the funny thing about this is that when Batman hands Deadpool his legs, he's like, oh, no worries, right? We decided on a trial separation between you and me. It's kind of working out. Keep them as novelty earrings, right? I'm pretty good. I was designed to function without feet, right? The indestructible boots I will hang on to. Now, of course, what's that a reference to? It's a reference to the fact that while Rob Liefeld is probably one of the 10 greatest comic book artists of all time, in the top 5 if you account for paradigm shifts, that man cannot draw feet to save his life, and he gets pissed whenever somebody brings it up. But he is one of the most important comic book artists in the history of the comic book industry, all joking aside. Had it not been for Liefeld, Portacio, Jim Lee, comic books would probably not be anywhere near as popular as they are today. But the fact is, right, Batman's just kind of like, so a healing factor, right? Like, that looks pretty painful. And Deadpool's like, I mean, it is, right? It's very painful, right? But I'm a smile though your heart is breaking kind of guy. But hey, thanks for asking. It confirms something that I've been wondering about you. And that's where Batman's just kind of like, I would say the same thing about you. He's like, let me ask you something else. Does the name Deathstroke mean anything to you, right? Because as we know, Deadpool is basically a riff on Deathstroke. But something to keep in mind here is that unlike the old school Marvel DC crossovers, where it was just Marvel and DC characters who just happened to live on a same Earth, this one is completely separate from the previous one-shot we did. They don't know each other, right? Like, they're completely unaware of each other in this particular story. So they're meeting for the first time yet again. And so in that question, Deadpool's just kind of like Deathstroke, right? Let me guess. It's a technical term in Olympic snuff swimming, a lethal self-abuse technique from the Kama Sutra, which kind of sounds like it would be, right? The Deathstroke. And he's like, so you're not a Slade Wilson then. That's good news, right? And then immediately attacks Deadpool. And Batman's like, you almost had me worried for a second, right? This place does not add up. This hyper-real hallucinatory edge to everything. And he just says, right, it reminds me of the labyrinth of the Court of Owls, because now that they're out of the rooms, they're literally kind of making their way down. Now, one of the cool things that goes on here is you get a reference to the Amalgam Universe. For those of you guys who don't know about the Amalgam Universe, it was both one of the coolest things Marvel DC ever did, but also one of the worst things they ever did, because some of the Amalgam characters were just downright trash, but there were some that were amazing. The idea behind the Amalgam Universe was that following the first major Marvel DC crossover event, that they created a singular universe where instead of it being a place where Marvel and DC characters both resided, they merged characters. Now, 99% of the time, they merged them with their other universe's counterpart, right? So Doctor Strange merges with Dr. Fate, so you get Doctor Strange Fate. But there was another Amalgam character that was created that will appear in the story. No spoilers for those of you guys who don't know what it is, but if you do know who it is, you're probably pretty amped at this point. So when Batman makes reference to the idea that this is very familiar to the Court of Owls, that Deadpool kind of comments on that, not really knowing what the Court of Owls is, and it's just kind of like, I'd say we've been no-clipped into liminal Las Vegas, but that's because my cultural references are marginally more up-to-date than yours. And he says, look, you got me all wrong, right? I had to make sure you're not some weirdo in cosplay. And Batman's just kind of like, by cutting off my head, you carry weapons that kill people. You have a bad guy name. And Deadpool's just kind of like, I don't know, man. I think that you'll find it's a morally ambiguous anti-hero name. He's like, somehow I do way more good than bad. And you were fine with this before. Right? So clearly he's referencing the previous story they were in, even though they seemingly never met before. And so Batman's just kind of like, so multiverse then. Some copy or echo of the original. If you're not Slade Wilson, you're not Deathstroke. And Deadpool's just kind of like, stop saying that, right? It's like you invented a new obscenity. I am Wade Wilson. Wade. Deadpool. I'm totally my own thing. You have to believe me. I love the way that Grant Morrison writes Deadpool. It's phenomenal. Right? And he says, I thought we'd moved on to the grudging mutual respect segment of our relationship arc. You won't hear me saying, you must be some version of Moon Knight or Nighthawk, Hawk Owl, right? Because as we know, Batman is not a copy of Moon Knight. That is an outrageous statement to make. Moon Knight's a copy of Batman. And so Batman's just like, I'm Batman, right? I am my own thing, right? And Deadpool's just kind of like, well, then whoever you are, if this is some elaborate escape room, we have to learn to work together all over again, like the Spice Girls. And Batman's just like, and people everywhere, right? Like, put those fresh set of feet to work, home slice. We gotta pedal our way out of here. So literally, they're basically in what amounts to like a tunnel of love, right? As twisted and sadistic as it may be. But the whole time they're going through here, Deadpool's just rambling, right? He's like, no way. I'd have gambled everything on Unforgiven, the outlaw Joe C. Wales. Anyway, wrong. Would I borrow my superhero name from the final Harry movie, which we've just agreed is in nobody's top 10 Clint's? He's like, can I say something? My incessant inane chatter usually drives men insane, but you're a tough gig. And so the question to ask is like, how is Batman coping with the inane chatter, the incessant nonsensical chatter of Deadpool? And Batman's just like, I fought crime alongside a hyperactive kid for years. My arch enemy is a murderous, disfigured clown. Have you been talking this whole time? Like, dude, I barely hear it, man, right? Like, you're just a dude over there. Like, I've dealt with worse. I love that response. It's an amazing response. And so Deadpool just kind of continues on, right? Like, this place gives me the willies, and wow, those willies have willies of their own now, right? You ever get the feeling that you're being watched? I do all the time. It's a big responsibility giving these filthy voyeurs their money's worth, like when the ape in the zoo, and then he gets cut off. Right? And Batman's just like singing, we are not alone in here, Wade. And Wade's like, yeah, my spidey sense is touching me in places medical science refuses to name. And I don't even have a spidey sense. Something about these claustrophobic, yet somehow nostalgic interior spaces we're trapped in with no memory of how we got here. It's giving uncertainty vibes. Am I the bold? Are you the brave? And Batman's just like, I'm Batman, right? I'm a detective. I look for clues, patterns. They're all around us, and I have a theory. And so at that point, they end up back in a room not that dissimilar from the cells they originally started out in, right? And Batman just kind of putting these pieces together. He says, the player piano, the hotel reception, the map of Florida, chess. What word links all of them? And it is a little finicky here. For example, Florida, it's the elephant graveyard of the United States. It's where old people go to die. But Deadpool is just kind of like, I mean, what is this, right? Like a cognitive test. Do I look like I care? Here's an idea. Why don't you save time by just telling us? And Batman's like, a basketball. And Deadpool's just kind of listening to all of this and is like, no, I cannot dunk. You found my kryptonite, right? My Achilles apple, my Adam's heel. How about you play sports, you muscle-bound privileged jock? I'm here to take lives. And he's like, words to live by, loser, because immediately all these crazy little cartoon characters start attacking all of them. And Deadpool's just like, I will never doubt my manifestation guru again. And what damage do you do, little gun? And literally like grabs this thing, fires the gun off, and it turns out that it shoots webs, right? And Batman's just like, you shoot webbing. And Deadpool's like, I mean, death by the happy ending, right? I respect your impractical code against killing bats, but these are evil cartoons, so they don't have feelings like us. That makes it funny, right? And Batman's just kind of listening to all of this, because remember, Batman is never one to just like hyper-focus on a conflict. He's always focusing on everything at all times. So that's why he's like, Deadpool, quiet. Like, I don't know you, but you know Batman. And Deadpool's just like, I mean, I know this much. Batman has something stronger than adamantium, more powerful than a locomotive. Batman has plot armor, buddy. It's the one thing that keeps you protected. And so Bruce kind of looking around is like, so maybe it's time to put that theory of mine to the test. And he just says, here, show me what you've got. And he just gets hit with all these arrows from like all these different directions. And that's when you cycle back around to the first appearance of Deadpool holding the body of Batman as they're making their way through. But Batman starts to realize something, right? That where Deadpool's like, oh my goodness gracious, right? You know, this man was shot with a bunch of arrows. Batman's just just like, not real, Deadpool. We're inside of a mind. The White Owl has us. And it's actually true, because in that moment, Cassandra Nova manifests, right? And she says, the great white owl to you, oh boys, can't you just try a wee bit harder for Auntie Cassandra? They've been in her thrall the entire time. They were never incels. Everything we've seen up to this point, outside of the opening scene of Batman in Gotham with Victor, and then him showing up in the jungle, has all been Cassandra Nova. And Cassandra says, you were searching for a weapon capable of killing me once and for all, Mr. Wilson. Too bad I tricked the world's greatest detective into finding it first. But he will not tell me what he found, no matter how deep inside I go. And so what's kind of funny is, for a moment, there's almost like this psychic backlash for Cassandra Nova when she's inside the mind of Bruce. And she's like, what the hell are you? How many Batmen are there? And Bruce is just kind of like, what is this? And Cassandra says, again, keys. Keys to what? Bring him back, Deadpool. I want that weapon. And Deadpool's just kind of like, don't die, Batman. If it's the last thing I do, I will not let you die, Caped Crusader. And so at that point, you kind of jump back to them being locked inside their own mind under the control of Cassandra Nova. And so of course you have Deadpool carrying Batman, and he's like, he's not heavy, right? He's my brother. Context, see, right? This guy is big, and I'm lucky I didn't get the absolute Henry Moore sculpture edition. Clearly a reference to just how gigantic absolute Batman is. He's like, he's for real, something like 6'9" or 6'7" or something like that, and like 420 pounds. He's a hoss. Absolute Batman is an absolute beast. It's nuts. But Deadpool's just like there, right? Last of the last of Ra's al Ghul's lost Lazarus pools, hidden behind the walls of the creepy petting zoo. And it's the orphan's annual trip, too. And he says, I hope nothing goes wrong. He's like, this might be the only way to save Batman. He'll be temporarily insane and potentially very naked, which means the only thing standing between him and an unsuspecting child's innocence is yours truly. And he says, so it's not the upbeat Temple of Life spa vibe that I had hoped for, but here goes nothing. And he just like dumps Batman inside of the Lazarus pit. And when that happens, Darkclaw manifests, right? Literally, Darkclaw pops out. And Deadpool's just like, oh, come the hell on, man. This is ridiculous, right? Now, Darkclaw in the Amalgam universe was emerging, as you can probably figure out, between Wolverine and Batman. Darkclaw was one of the most dope things to come out of the Amalgam universe. It was pretty solid when that happened. And so initially you get this kind of bout of like temporary insanity where like literally Batman is trying to attack Deadpool and quite literally kill him as best he can. And he just keeps saying things, right? Like, I'm Darkclaw, right? Batman with a rapid healing factor. And Deadpool's just trying to get away as best he can. But after a while, of course, the temporary insanity starts to abate and Bruce Wayne starts to regain his mind. And he says, it's never too late to win. Deadpool, we have to get her out of our minds. And Deadpool's like, how? And Batman's like, prep. And Deadpool's like, what? And Batman's just like, I don't work alone. And if there's one thing I rely on, it's this. I have a partner who never does what he's told. And so what you end up doing is you realize that in this moment when Cassandra Nova has Batman and Deadpool under her control, Damian Wayne is watching the whole thing because, as you guys know, Damian Wayne never does what he's told, right? He's always ignoring directions by Batman. And Cassandra Nova is just kind of like, wait, a partner? And Damian Wayne just like immediately jumps on Cassandra in the real world, which of course brings Cassandra's hands out of Deadpool and Batman's heads. And so at that point, they can go back on the attack. And Batman's like, Deadpool, the fortress, we need to get there before she does. And Deadpool's just kind of like, okay, so order me around some more. I am loving the mini-me. And Damian's just like, mini-me? Like, I am not a mini-me. I am Damian. I'm not a mini Batman. I'm the son of Batman. It's like, oh, you're so adorable, Damian. You're 100% a mini Batman. Right? And so Deadpool's just kind of like, he seems well adjusted. Alas, poor bestiomorphs, right? All they craved were forever homes in in the suburbs. Great emotional support if you can overlook the undying hunger for human flesh. Half man, half monster. Toilet training was a luxury they could never afford. But again, Batman, kind of ignoring all of this, just says Deadpool right there. And he says anybody you know. And it's just like a person standing there in an archway with seemingly the corpse of Batman laying there, right? And this person just says, the story so far, Cassandra Nova maneuvered Batman into tracking down the lost quantum keyboard. The TVA contracted Deadpool to neutralize and behead Cassandra before she could get her hands on it. And so Deadpool's just kind of like, is it the Phantom stenographer? What are they holding? And so Batman just says, one of the most dangerous objects in existence. My image of it hidden behind a mental firewall Cassandra could not breach. All those clues in the form of keys, the weapon is a cosmic keyboard, rumored to rewrite reality. But what's literally happening is that Batman is saying these things as it's being written. So quite literally, this person is writing reality in the moment. Because Batman says, lost when a minor villain known as the Writer was killed during a disastrous Suicide Squad mission. Victor Gover, aka Sportsman, was there that day on that mission. 3 days ago, his fiancée was caught in a crossfire when Victor's knowledge became valuable to some ruthless people. And again, it's all being typed out. And so that's what this guy just says, smooth exposition, right? I can handle the rest. The funny thing about this is that this is clearly Grant Morrison. He wrote himself into this story. I guess maybe you could argue as Professor Xavier, but I like the idea that it's Grant Morrison better. And so we're just going to call him that, right? So Grant Morrison says, that's the Batman of Earth 7642 at my feet, by the way. You were plotted into Earth 7642 continuity by this old thing. This relic is the MacGuffin everyone's chasing. So quite literally, Grant Morrison plucked Batman out of the DC universe and brought him to this place where he would encounter Deadpool. So the whole thing is just a giant story, right? It's just a story being written in real time by Grant Morrison using what looks like a 30-year-old laptop. And so in turn, Batman's just like, figured as much. Right? And Deadpool's just kind of like, not the cosmic keytar? Holy cow, Batman. He's like, if that thing falls into the wrong hands, it could usher in a nightmare era of Jan Hammer 80s inspired soft rock tyranny. Or worse, the return of the Snyderverse. And so he's just like, so wait, rewind. You are what? A way cooler, tougher, sexier Batman than Earth 7642. Flat out on his cape there. Now, here's what's so funny about all of this. The idea of Earth 7642. Remember when I was talking about how this is one of those instances where the characters don't know each other, despite it being a continuation of the original? It wasn't always that way. If you go all the way back to when like Superman and Spider-Man first met, which is basically the beginning of the Marvel DC crossovers, it wasn't as though they crashed into each other from alternate realities. It was actually the result of Lex Luthor and Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus maybe, basically kidnapping their girlfriends and then like orchestrating a great big huge plot from there. Earth 7642 is that universe. It's all the old school Marvel DC crossovers from back in the day. Spider-Man, Superman, the Incredible Hulk, Batman, they all lived on the same reality. And so they all knew each other. It was one of the coolest aspects of the history of Marvel and DC crossovers, which thankfully we have a whole playlist, I'm pretty sure, of all that stuff. My guys, Alex will actually put it in the description this time. But in knowing that, it makes that Batman who's laying there all the more interesting. Because what ends up happening is he tells Deadpool, right, we cannot let it fall into Cassandra Nova's hands. And that's where Grant Morrison is just like, it will not run for Cassandra Nova or anybody else, only me. And even then, it'll never write canon again, if it works at all. So seemingly this is Grant Morrison saying this is like the last story he's ever going to write. And he's like, maybe we could use it to wrap up this adventure and find out what happens. And he says, Batman, check. Deadpool, check. Villain, check. Guest, we could probably use a twist around about now. And like Cassandra Nova pops up behind him, right? And it was like, see, the thing is, I don't need to make the device work. I'll just dictate and you will do as you're told. For Batman and Deadpool, time stretched to a standstill. And then like Grant Morrison writes, for Batman and Deadpool, time stretched to a standstill. And Cassandra's just like, next, you're going to write them as cannibal flesh addicts, turn them loose on their loved ones. We'll write a horror story, you and I, together, where the monsters win. And so at that point, Grant's just like, horror? You want horror? Take a look. And at that point, Cassandra's like, no, wait a minute, that's not, like, you cannot resist my mind control. And Grant's like, I mean, is it impossible, right? Like, what if you just appear out of nowhere? What if you were made up on a machine just like this one? And she's like, there's no way that could be true. And then suddenly she can't like think of any unique ideas. And Grant's just kind of like all out of ideas, Cassandra Nova, writer's block, right? And she's like, you made me this way. And he's like, well, they say it happens now and again. Do you want to see what it looks like when I run out of ideas? You broke the Batman and peed on the pool. Now face the music. The most ridiculous statement that I think I've ever heard. But the funny thing about that is that what ends up happening is that when these two universes essentially come together at the beginning of the story, Batman and Deadpool merge. And when that happens, literally Deadpool becomes Batman, or Batman becomes Deadpool, depending on how you want to look at it. But it's pretty badass, because in that moment, they behead Cassandra Nova. You only see it for a split second, right? Just long enough to kill Cassandra. But like, that's it. It's a pretty dope moment, right? It's pretty awesome. And so Cassandra Nova is basically just kind of like in this nonsensical state, right? A is for Adam, B is for bomb, C for the children, D the new dawn, right? Just kind of going on about nonsense. And so Deadpool just having her head in a jar is just kind of like, she'll live again. She always does. But for now, my work is done. And he says, when Earth 7642 Batman finally comes to, I'll be sure to tell him how much I'll treasure my mostly imaginary team up with the real thing. And it's like, give him my regards. So there does seem to be some illusion here that the Batman that Deadpool teamed up with in the first storyline, in Batman Deadpool, as opposed to this one, Deadpool Batman, that was actually the Batman of Earth 7642. So again, it's kind of a cool little reference, because in that moment, Deadpool's kind of like, it may have been mid to you, but we shared memories that I will savor again and again, alone in the dark. Sayonara, Dark Moon, Hawk Owl. And ultimately, like, he just leaves. And so at that moment, you have Grant Morrison talking directly to Batman. So he's like, whatever unknown cosmic junction triggered the keyboard, it's ultimately over. But anyway, the president signed an executive order. They're rebuilding the fourth wall to keep out unwanted ideas, so I can't hang around. And I only showed up to grab a souvenir in case I simply just don't get back. And Batman's just like, I have no clue what you're talking about. And Damian's there, right? And he's like, she got away, right? She got a head start. And like, what? Like, Damian doesn't know what's going on. He's like, wait a minute, what? Like, because the story just stops, right? He's like, there's no one writing it anymore. And so at that point, Batman's like, before you go, right? You said that you cannot rewrite canon with that thing. What can you do? And so one of the cool things that happens is that seemingly Grant Morrison basically writes things out. But before we find out what he does, you switch back over to the cosmic entities. And so Eternity's like, so like another time, perhaps? As Supreme Being, I have all the time. And she's like, sure, why not, right? I mean, I'm always down for a booty call. And so he's like, wait, like, you dare not rape me, not yet. We're not done. Because apparently Eternity has a little bit of performance anxiety, or maybe a little bit of struggle towards the end of their coming together. But one of the cool things that Grant had basically done here is he had essentially written back Victor's wife. He restored her to life, right? So everything kind of ends with a happy ending. Yeah, it's a cool story, right? It's a Grant Morrison story, so it's a little batshit insane, but it is fun. It's awesome. So with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Definitely one of the most off-the-rails stories that I've ever read. But hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button, and I will catch you all later. Peace.